Good morning, everyone. We're very, very thrilled to be joining you this morning from Mpala on Mpala Live with Dr. Jane Goodall, who's here visiting us, and we're going to be having a conversation. You can follow it on Facebook and Twitter, and I'll start by asking Dr. Jane Goodall to introduce herself. Everybody knows her, but to just tell us a little bit about herself and her background. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you. Well, I'm Jane Goodall, obviously. And I was born in 1934 in England to a family with not very much money, and I grew up during the war years, and we didn't have enough money for me to go to college, so I had to do a boring old secretarial course, and then I got invited by a school friend to visit her in Kenya. As it was when I was 10 years old that I first determined I would grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. After reading Tarzan and falling in love with him, I was jumping at this opportunity. First I had to raise the money for the fare to get out to Kenya, and this I did by working as a waitress because secretaries didn't get much money. And so that's how I arrived in Kenya in 1956 by boat, because that was the cheapest way. So that's how my African adventures began.
That's wonderful. So Jane, you've spent some time with us and inspired our students, and we have millions of people around the world who admire and follow your work. One of the things that you always speak to is hope. And could you maybe tell us why should we be hopeful when there's so many things in the world that make us sad?
Well, I've got my 5 reasons for hope. And the first one, I have to back off a bit, because when I was traveling around the world trying to raise money for our projects in Africa, by that time looking after chimpanzee orphans in sanctuaries, working with people living in and around chimp habitats in 6 countries, improving their lives, so they became our partners. And while I was traveling around the world raising money for these projects, and also raising awareness about what was going on in Africa and how chimpanzee numbers were vanishing and forests were being destroyed and fragmentation of habitats and all these things. And I was meeting young people who didn't seem to have much hope. And these were mostly high school students, university students, and this was in all continents. And so I began asking them why they felt either depressed or angry or just not seeming to care. And they all said more or less the same: we feel this way because you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. So we have compromised the future of our young people. And the old saying, we haven't inherited this planet from our parents, we've borrowed it from our children, is no longer true. We've stolen, not borrowed. But we've got to get together and start trying to heal some of the harm we've inflicted. But I don't think it's too late. So when the students said there's nothing they can do about it, I said, no, you're wrong. And so that's when our youth program, Roots and Shoots, began in 1991. With 12 high school students. Main message: every single one of us, humans matters. We all have a role to play, even if we don't know what it is. Most important of all, each one of us makes some impact on the planet every single day by just the little choices we make, what we eat, what we buy, what we wear. You know, think about the consequences of that for the future. And so right from the beginning, we decided Roots and Shoots would be young people choosing their own projects, but choosing 3, 1 to help people, 1 to help animals, 1 to help the environment. Talking about these things, working out what they could do, and then rolling up their sleeves and getting out and taking action. And so now that program is in 100 countries, kindergarten members, university members, everything in between. And so everywhere I go in the world now, I see these shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they've been doing to make this a better world. And so that gives me hope. And I think you've seen the same with your wildlife, with your conservation clubs, And so when you see these young people, their energy, their determination, their commitment, yes, that gives me the most hope. But then secondly is this brain. So what makes us most different from our closest relatives, the chimpanzees? It's this explosive development of our intellect. And it's really bizarre that the most intellectual creature that's probably ever walked the planet is destroying its only home. But now that we're beginning, awareness is growing all around the world. Awareness of what we're doing to the planet is growing. And so technology is being invented that will enable us to live in greater harmony. Like, let's get away from dirty fossil fuel, clean green energy from the sun, from the wind, from the tides, and all the inventions that are being made that we hear about all the time. These sunglasses, they're called C to C, SEA to SEE. They're made from recycled plastic, reclaimed from the ocean, and they're becoming very popular. So, there's this amazing brain that is now beginning to find ways, and in our own individual lives, making the right little choices each day, so each one of us leaves as light an ecological footprint as possible. My third reason for hope is the resilience of nature. So at one time, like in 1970, I flew over Gombe and I saw Gombe was part of the great equatorial forest belt stretching from East Africa through Uganda, through the Great Congo Basin to the West African coast. By 1990, when I flew over, Gombe was a little island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, and there were more people living there than the land could support, and they were too poor to buy food from elsewhere. So of course they were denuding these steep hillsides of trees because they were desperate. And when you're desperate, that's what you have to do. That's when it hit me. If we don't do something to help the people, there's no way we can even try to save the chimps. So we began our Jane Goodall Institute program to improve the lives of the people in a very holistic way, with them choosing what they thought we could do to help them, not us telling them what we thought we could do to help them. And that program is now in 6 different African countries. So now the people have become our partners in conservation, and if you fly over that area today, there aren't any bare hills anymore. They're covered. So, the resilience of nature is amazing. And I love thinking of seeds that can stay 2,000 years and yet come to life. I mean, to me, it's utterly amazing. And then animal species on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. I wrote a whole book on it. And my next reason for hope is social media. Like our conversation now, because of advances in technology, can be seen how many places?
All over the world.
All over the world. That couldn't have happened 20 years ago. And, if our youth groups, say your groups and my groups, we decide, okay, we want to get together to protest the illegal hunting of elephants for their ivory. And we want to get a lot of voices. We want to feel supported, so we can send out tweets or whatever on social media, and we can have a day when all around the world people will take part in demonstrations saying, we want to save elephants, don't buy ivory, don't buy ivory. It comes from shooting elephants. We couldn't have done that before. And then my final reason for hope is this indomitable human spirit where you get people who tackle what seems impossible and they don't give up and they succeed.
Thank you. I would like to come back to the point you raised about intellect and intelligence, because humans are not the only intelligent beings on this planet. Is that correct?
It's when I first went to Cambridge, never having been to college to do a PhD, I'd been with the chimps 2 years in Gombe, and I was extremely nervous. I mean, you know, have you not been to college and all these professors with all their knowledge? And the first thing that happened is I was told by some of them I'd done everything wrong. Chimpanzees should have had numbers, not names. That wasn't scientific. And I couldn't talk about them having personalities. Only humans have personality. Couldn't talk about them having emotions, happiness, sadness, fear, despair. Only humans have emotions like that. And I certainly couldn't talk about them having minds capable of thinking. Well, fortunately, I had a teacher when I was a child who taught me that the professors were wrong, and that was my dog. Exactly.
Like
yes, exactly. And so I stuck to my conviction. I had a wonderful supervisor who actually helped me. And today, we realize, I mean, to me, right now, is for any person wanting to study animal intelligence, this is the perfect time, because the scientific mind has opened out, and we're beginning to find out it isn't just chimpanzees and other primates and dolphins and elephants who are intelligent, but birds. Amazing. There are crows who can work out some problems better than chimps, probably better than a lot of humans. And, you know, we're finding there's a whole flurry of interest now in bird intelligence. There's a huge new focusing on the intelligence of the octopus. So the bird brain is structured differently from the mammalian brain. The octopus doesn't really have a brain, it has a central nervous system. It's a sort of brain, isn't it? But what octopus can do is unbelievable. They work out problems. They can walk out into an area of the ocean where there are no rocks to protect their soft bodies, and they carry with them like 2 halves of an empty coconut shell and put it on the ocean floor. And the man who saw this, he said, I very nearly died because you're not allowed to laugh underwater. And he said, I couldn't help it, because there it is, using 2 tentacles on each side to carry these shells, putting half the shell down, oozing their soft body into it. They can go into tiny spaces, and then reaching out with a free tentacle and putting the lid on. It's, I mean, everybody watching should Google octopus and coconut shell if you want a good laugh. And now it's been seen in many species of octopus. They take empty clamshells, and you also see them feeling around a clamshell and thinking, no, that's no good, it's too small. So they might carry it a little way, and then they find a better one, so they dump the old one. And it's amazing. And now we found even insects, bumblebees, can be taught to roll a little bead, and if they drop it down a hole, they get a honey reward. And that's pretty amazing. But other bumblebees who haven't been taught at all can do straight away that task just from watching trained bumblebees. So what I always say is, we've got to stop being so amazed at these new discoveries. We should take for granted we're certainly not the only. We're very intellectual, but that doesn't mean we're frightfully intelligent. And I think what we've lost is wisdom. You know, in the old days, decisions were made by the elders sitting around the campfire and discussing things. How will this affect future generations? Now, how will it affect me now? How will it affect the next shareholders meeting? We're in this greedy, materialistic world, and it's a tragedy.
So you've brought up the issue of us being materialistic and looking at the world. I'd like to bring that back to the idea of we're sharing the planet with so many other species, and also the idea of hope. Mpala is in northern Kenya. This is a beautiful landscape where just right now it's so green and lovely, but it's dry a lot of the year, and water is one of the most crucial aspects of this landscape that has to be shared between people and elephants and livestock. We also have some amazing endangered species here, like the reticulated giraffe and the Grevy's zebra, which we were very lucky to see yesterday.
Yes.
And the good news with the Grevy's zebra is that citizen science has enabled us to understand how many are out there. And I know that you're doing a lot of work with young people, with citizen scientists, and with chimpanzees. Could you tell us a little bit about some of that work?
Well, in our Roots and Shoots groups is really where we're doing citizen science. And it's not so much with chimpanzees, because we don't have many young people out. You know, there are not many chimps in there in the rainforest, and we don't have too many citizen scientists out there. But for example, you have swifts here.
Yeah.
And swifts to me are a most incredible bird, spending the first 3 years of their lives not touching the ground once they leave the nest, sleeping in the air, feeding in the air, even mating in the air until they come down to nest. And their migration is so huge. And then there are different populations of swifts in different parts of the world with different migration routes. So we're now using citizen science to get Roots and Shoots groups along migration routes of swifts. And they're noting when they first see the swifts, if they're nesting, if they're flying, or whatever it is. And all this information can be pooled. But in a way, we're using citizen science in our chimp work by training volunteers from the villages around chimp habitat. And in Tanzania, very few of the chimps are actually in protected areas. They're in village forest reserves, which were being destroyed. But now we've got our program in 72 villages. And each village produces 1 or 2 volunteers who just get minimal amounts of money, and they go to a workshop and they learn to use smartphones or iTablets. So even if they can't read or write, they've chosen what they want to record in their forest. They're proud of them now. And they've learned about chimpanzees and how exciting they are. And we have our chimpanzee field staff go and talk to them. And so they're recording an illegally cut tree, a cartridge they find on the ground, an animal trap, a snare, and the positive, a chimp nest, the sighting of a leopard or a pangolin. And all of this information, which is standardized, goes up to a platform in the clouds, Global Forest Watch. And so everything is now transparent. And we can see what's going on, the village chiefs can see what's going on. They can't any longer pretend that they're protecting a forest whilst destroying the middle, because we can see it. And we're using drones as well. So citizen science it's a way for everybody to help us understand just what is out there. And it's no longer the domain just of scientists who have tended to live in ivory towers. What's interesting about that is that because more and more people are understanding the horror of climate change, I think it's the first time that scientists came out of their ivory towers to join in demonstrations against the Trump administration.
So that brings up an important point of we can do so much as scientists, as citizens, but political systems are sometimes very difficult to navigate, and often scientists or even students feel frustrated or even hopeless when they are confronted by a world that's becoming so much more divided. How would you speak to that as a scientist and as a human being who's done so much on the planet?
Well, I think the thing is, you know, the problem is different in different countries. So in some countries where the president sets himself up as, you know, the only voice that can make decisions in the country, and he has his loyal supporters behind him who are all hoping for political favours, and when you get so much corruption, it's very difficult. So all we've managed to do is just quietly go on at the grassroots level, growing up young people who think differently, looking at the positive, seeing that in spite of all these problems, you know, we still have beautiful patches of nature, even sometimes in the middle of cities. And that happened for the first time in Barcelona in Spain. And our Roots and Shoots coordinator, who happens to be from Argentina, he got all these young students to go out and record what they'd seen, another example of citizen science, and take photographs or make paintings. And what was discovered within the limits of the city, people had no idea that there were rare butterflies, there were some rare plants. And so it's a whole exciting, you know, even if we destroy things, somehow life clings on. And you sometimes find a highly endangered species, even one that people thought was extinct, and there it is under your very noses, clinging on to life at the edge of some industrial wasteland. Nature is amazing, and there is always hope. So in these difficult political situations, you can try talking to the politicians, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't, so you just have to carry on.
So one last question, and this question comes from Barbara. You've spoken to the importance of dogs as your teacher. So Barbara's question is, do you think people domesticated dogs or dogs domesticated people?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. A little bit of both. Where's Dudu? Barbara's
Dudu.
friend.
Come on, Dudu.
Dudu, come Dudu. Dudu, come, come, come. Yes, that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for joining us this morning. Beautiful morning here at Mpala. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Please send us in your questions and comments and share and be hopeful and enjoy. And thanks again.